Well, after a few months of optimism and then I suppose the difficulty of that GDP figure last week that showed our economy shrank by 0.3% in the third quarter, well, there's still a sense, I think, from many people of a good sort of sentiment heading into next year. KPMG suggesting they're a bit more optimistic. They think our economy will grow by 1.5% next year, 1.8% in 2026. The real change for you, though, might well be in inflation. Frank Blackmore is the lead economist at KPMG SA. Frank, good evening to you. So, look, any increase in economic growth is important. We'll take it. How realistic do you think that forecast of 1.8 is? And it's still not where we would like it, but it's certainly better than we've had.
I think it's pretty realistic. And just listening to your previous expert commentator, I think the biggest difference between our third quarter and fourth quarter outlook has basically been to sort of dial back those growth numbers slightly based on the fact that the U.S. elections went one way, and that brought with it a lot of uncertainty geopolitically through the potential trade and immigration policies that may come in on that side. So instead of having 1.8 for next year's growth, it's now deferred for 2 years to 2026, and I think that is possible if we continue moving in the right direction in a number of areas. We know that the sort of business and government initiative has made a lot of headwind with respect to the electricity supply this year, especially in the second half. And now they're looking at other logistics and network industries as well, rail, road, etc., in order to get more efficiencies out of those. That should see some growth on. And then, of course, the reductions in interest rates that we still expect to take place well into the middle of next year will also help both consumers and businesses and will help support growth as a result.
I mean, in some way, 1.8% doesn't really move the needle in terms of changing people's lives. I suppose there's no realistic hope that it'll be any higher than that. There was talk earlier in the year of a stretch target of 3%. Looks like that stretch is now beyond our reach.
I think so. I mean, from reports one has seen, just based on the electricity supply, if the economy grows near to around 2%, we run out of power again, so we'll be in load shedding situation once more. And that sort of says that we're not out of the woods with respect to even electricity now. We know a lot of private suppliers come online, but a lot more investment needs to take place, especially on the transmission and distribution, as well as the management systems for these for the sustainable energy coming online. So I don't think it would be realistic for us to touch on that 3%, but that's the type of level that we need to grow to have a meaningful difference with respect to unemployment, start bringing that down over time, getting more people into the economy, get businesses starting to invest again at a higher rate. We would require that 3% type growth.
But, I mean, what really should be a good news story next year is inflation, particularly compared to how it's been over the last little while. I mean, it's really going to be much reduced, significantly reduced.
Yes, absolutely. We know the latest figure of 2.8 is very low. Historically, last seen in February 2021, and that's obviously after there was no demand in the economy following COVID. And we expect inflation to remain below that target level of the Reserve Bank's 4.5% for at least next year, possibly well into 2026, which will mean we can expect perhaps a further percentage point decrease in the interest rate. That puts us somewhere around 6.75% at the end of the cycle, and I think that will be significant enough to allow both businesses and consumers to up their spending, and not have to contribute so much towards debt servicing, as well as making a number of growth and other strategic projects viable for businesses at that type of rate.
The big variable, I mean, is it geopolitics and Donald Trump? I mean, a lot can happen. He's not just going to sit in the White House and do nothing. Russia, Ukraine, I can't really see a solution. I can't, unfortunately, see a solution to the series of conflicts and the suffering in the Middle East. I mean, this is the big thing, is geopolitics has changed the game in the last 5 years.
Absolutely. So as part of these global economic outlooks we bring out quarterly, the global version has the uncertainty around, obviously, the post-election policies that could come in. We know that if there are tariffs, and depending on what their migration policies would be as well, both of those would probably be inflationary, leaving inflation higher for longer, meaning that interest rates would potentially not come down as far as they would have without these policies being in place. We already see the yields increasing in the U.S., anticipating a higher level of inflation and uncertainty over time. And if you look at places like the European Union, the EU, they're also concerned, obviously, around these policies, but also they have quite an anti-corporate sentiment these days. There are a lot of lawsuits against the big multinationals. But there are also some headwinds as well. In Europe, on the fiscal side, that's government spending, more supportive expenditure on sectors such as pension funding. We know their populations are aging, so they need to put more money into that sort of pension, healthcare, and things like defense as well. And those things might boost growth. So there's a lot of uncertainty. There are pros and cons both sides. I do feel that version 2 of Donald Trump may be slightly different to what we were used to in version 1, but no less unpredictable in what his policies could be.
And, I mean, does any of this lead to our economy creating more jobs over the next year or two?
Unfortunately not. I think this goes back to your original question. If I just look at the net population growth in South Africa, so that's including migration, births, deaths, etc., we're growing at around 1.5%, per year. And therefore, economic growth needs to be at least that to match it, which it isn't currently. I mean, we see growth this year being probably just over half of that. And to make a meaningful difference, you'd have to be closer to that 3% we referred to in order to increase that economic conclusion and sustainably start reducing that unemployment rate over time. But until we get to that type of level, and there obviously is a complex question, because not only do we need to solve things like logistics bottlenecks, we also have to focus on improving the efficiencies of our cities. We know a lot of businesses are located within urban areas. And if those urban areas decay with, water leaks and services not delivered, that impacts businesses and the efficiency of those businesses. And then general government services. You need a healthy workforce, which means healthcare must work. You need a safe workforce that can commute around. So, things like transportation, safety are there. And then, of course, to attract investment from overseas, we also have to do something about crime and corruption at the top level. So it's a complex problem to increase growth, but I feel we are moving in the right direction.
Frank Blackmore, thanks very much indeed. Lead Economist at KPMG.